They spoke about her as if she were not standing there. Mute girls are easy. They don't argue. She won't answer you. She never does. Leave her. She's not worth the effort. Their voices brushed past her like cold wind, familiar and sharp. She kept her head bowed, eyes fixed on the stone beneath her feet. Her hands were folded neatly in front of her, fingers laced tight enough to ache. Pain kept her present. Pain reminded her to stay still. Still meant safe. Around her, the packed courtyard pulsed with life, boots scraping stone, laughter bursting and dying, the heavy scent of wolves who knew they were powerful and unchallenged. This place belonged to them. It always had. Females like her simply existed within it, tolerated until they were chosen or discarded. A cracked wooden bucket slid across the ground and struck her ankle. She did not cry out. Water spilled, soaking the hem of her thin dress. A few of the warriors laughed. One of them nudged another with his elbow, amused by how quickly she dropped to her knees to clean the mess. "See," he said. Not a sound. She gathered the broken pieces slowly, carefully. Her movements were calm, deliberate. Anyone watching would think she felt nothing at all. Inside, her heart was racing. Silence had saved her life once. It had cost her almost everything else, but she was still breathing. That mattered more than dignity, more than comfort, more than being seen. In this pack, unmated females had no protection. No choice. A higher-ranking wolf could claim a woman simply because he wanted her. Because no one strong enough stood in his way. Because the laws were written by those who never had to fear them. She had learned that lesson young. So she learned to disappear. They called her broken. They called her empty. Some pitied her. Most ignored her. A few used her, knowing she would never protest. A mute girl was safe in the worst way, safe to mistreat, safe to overlook, safe to forget. If only they knew how sharp her mind was. She noticed everything. The way tempers shifted before violence followed. The way certain males circled prey before choosing it. The way fear smelled different from desire. She remembered faces. Remembered debts. Remembered kindness, rare as it was. She remembered danger most of all. The noise of the courtyard shifted suddenly. Conversations dipped. Laughter stuttered to a stop. Her instincts tightened. Power had entered the space. She did not look up right away. Looking up invited attention. Attention led to questions. Questions led to truths she could not afford to reveal. But the weight of the presence was undeniable, heavy, commanding, steady. The kind of authority that did not shout. Slowly, against her better judgment, she lifted her gaze. He stood at the far edge of the courtyard. The Alpha King. He was taller than the others, broader, his posture relaxed in a way that spoke of absolute control. Warriors straightened unconsciously around him. Elders bowed their heads. Even the air seemed to still, as though the pack itself was listening. He was not cruel-looking. That frightened her more. His expression was calm, unreadable, his eyes dark and focused. They swept the courtyard once, assessing, measuring, before stopping on her. On her. Her breath caught. For a single heartbeat, the world narrowed to the space between them. She felt seen in a way that made her skin prickle. Not hunted. Not desired. Observed. As if he sensed something that did not belong. She looked away immediately, pulse pounding. Alphas did not notice girls like her. Kings did not waste attention on silence. A whisper rippled nearby. Why is he looking at the mute? Heat crawled up her spine. She bowed lower, wishing herself smaller, duller, invisible again. Her fingers dug into her palms, grounding herself. At last, the Alpha King turned away. Relief crashed through her so hard her knees nearly buckled. But before the courtyard could breathe again, his voice cut through the space, deep, even, impossible to ignore. All unmated females will present themselves at dusk. The words fell like a blade. A selection gathering. Her stomach dropped. Around her, reactions flared, anticipation, fear, hunger, hope. Some smiled. Some whispered. Some straightened their backs, already imagining what might be gained. She did none of those things. Dusk meant torches. Eyes. Judgment. Dusk meant being seen. As the crowd dispersed, a runner stopped directly in front of her. He did not bother hiding his impatience. "You," he said sharply. "The Alpha King has summoned you." The world tilted beneath her feet. Summoned. Her heart thundered. Slowly, she rose, keeping her face blank, her lips sealed. Silence wrapped around her like a shield she had worn for 8 long years. It had protected her before. She prayed, without words, that it still would. Because if the Alpha King ever learned why she had chosen silence, being heard might be far more dangerous than never speaking at all. The memory came for her the way it always did, without warning, without mercy. The scent hit first. Sharp. Male. Claiming. Her breath faltered as she followed the runner through the narrow paths between stone dwellings. The present blurred, edges softening, until her thoughts slipped backward to a time when her voice had still been unbroken. She had been younger then. Smaller. Still foolish enough to believe that silence was weakness instead of armor. He had cornered her near the training grounds, where no one lingered after dusk. A high-ranking shifter, broad-shouldered, already drunk on his own authority. She remembered the way his gaze lingered too long, the way his smile had sharpened when she tried to step past him. "Say something," he had murmured, blocking her path. "I like to hear them beg." Her voice had worked then. She had used it. She had screamed. No one came. That was the night she learned the truth of pack law. That if a male strong enough decided you belonged to him, your protest was just noise. That a cry was not protection. It was invitation. That survival sometimes meant becoming something no one wanted to look at too closely. She escaped that night by chance alone. A distraction. A passing guard. A moment of opportunity she never understood fully. But she understood what followed. The next morning, her throat had ached from screaming. By the next week, she stopped speaking altogether. By the next moon, the pack had decided she was mute. She never corrected them. 8 years of silence followed. 8 years of lowered eyes and careful steps. Of being assigned the tasks no one wanted. Cleaning, carrying, mending. Of being spoken over, spoken around, never to. Of being safe only because she was considered worthless. She learned to listen instead. In silence, she heard cruelty before it struck. She heard desire before it turned violent. She learned which footsteps meant danger and which meant indifference. She learned to move just out of reach. Some were kind, in small ways. A healer who pressed an extra bandage into her hands. A cook who slid her a heel of bread when no one was looking. Kindness never lingered, but she stored it carefully, like something fragile. Cruelty was louder. She shook her head once, small and instinctive, begging without words. His expression hardened, not with anger, but with resolve. "No one is to question this decision," he said. "She is under my protection." Protection. The word echoed painfully inside her chest. She bowed deeply, as she was expected to do, hiding the tremor that ran through her. As the crowd dispersed, a woman brushed past her, eyes sharp with jealousy. "Careful," she whispered. "Kings don't protect without reason." The Alpha King waited until they were alone. "You are afraid," he said. She froze. He did not demand a response. He did not demand anything at all. "You will not be forced," he added quietly. "Not here. Not by me." Her throat tightened. She wanted to believe him. But belief had once nearly destroyed her. He turned away, already dismissing her, as though the matter were settled. As though her fate had not just been uprooted with a single decision. As she followed the guard toward his domain, her thoughts raced, fear tangling with something far more dangerous. Hope. Because for the first time in 8 years, someone powerful had noticed her silence. And decided not to break it. But to keep her close enough to listen. The Alpha King's domain did not feel like the rest of the pack. The moment she crossed the boundary, something shifted, an invisible pressure easing, replaced by order so precise it felt almost quiet. Guards moved with discipline, not boredom. Wolves greeted one another with respect instead of challenge. Even the air seemed cleaner here, sharpened by purpose. She walked a step behind the escort, eyes lowered, heart pounding. Every instinct warned her this was dangerous. Power gathered here. Decisions were made here. Laws were enforced here. Silence, her greatest shield, might not hold under scrutiny so close to the source of authority. They led her to a modest chamber near the inner halls. Not a cell. Not luxury. Simple. Clean. A space that felt intentional. "You'll remain here," the guard said gruffly. "You answer only when summoned." She nodded. The door closed behind her with a solid thud that echoed too loudly in the quiet room. Alone, she sank slowly to the edge of the narrow bed. Her hands shook now that no one was watching. She pressed her palms together, grounding herself, forcing her breath into a steady rhythm. "Why here?" Whispers followed her even inside these walls. She heard them in passing glances, half-turned faces, lowered voices. Why would he choose her? She has nothing. She doesn't even speak. Jealousy was sharp. Suspicion sharper. She expected him to summon her immediately. To test her. To demand answers she could not give. Instead, hours passed. Then a full day. No questions. No commands. Only boundaries. No one touched her. No one mocked her. No one ordered her to hurry. When she worked, it was alone or at the edges, unnoticed but undisturbed. At night, she lay awake, listening. Footsteps. Breathing. The distant echo of his presence somewhere beyond the walls. She learned the rhythm of this place the way she always did. Through attention, through silence. On the third day, she felt him before she saw him. She was in the outer corridor, arranging supplies, when the air shifted. Her spine straightened instinctively. She turned just as he entered the hall. The Alpha King stopped when he saw her. For a long moment, neither of them moved. She bowed her head quickly, pulse racing. "Look at me," he said. The request was calm, unforced. Slowly, she lifted her gaze. His eyes searched her face, not her body, not her scent, but her expression. As if he were looking for something specific. As if he expected to find it. "You are quieter here," he said at last. She didn't know what that meant. She only knew her chest felt tight. "This place does not frighten you the way it should," he continued. "Yet you are afraid of me." Her fingers curled into her palms. Fear was safer than trust. "I will not force you to speak," he said, as if answering a thought she hadn't dared to form. "But I will observe you." Her breath caught at that. Observation meant attention. Attention meant risk. Yet when he turned away, she realized something else had been given alongside the danger. Time. Days passed. Then more. He watched her from a distance. Tested her subtly. Ordered changes and waited to see how she adapted. Not once did he corner her. Not once did he raise his voice. When others grew careless with her, his presence alone was enough to make them step back. Protection. Quiet and absolute. She began to relax despite herself. It frightened her how quickly her body responded to the safety he offered. How her shoulders loosened. How her steps grew surer. How she no longer flinched at every sudden sound. They shared space without words. Sometimes he stood near while she worked. Sometimes he passed without a glance, as though leaving her alone was its own form of restraint. She learned the cadence of his movements, the way authority followed him like a shadow. Once, a high-ranking warrior sneered at her, muttering something cruel under his breath. The Alpha King did not speak. He only turned his head. The warrior went pale and backed away. Her heart stumbled. Why was he doing this? She had nothing to offer him. No voice. No rank. No alliance. Only silence and a past she kept locked away. The whispers grew louder. She must be hiding something. No one protects without intent. A king does not choose without reason. She heard them all. At night, alone in her chamber, fear returned. What if he discovered the truth? What if protection turned into claiming? What if safety was only a slower kind of trap? She pressed a hand to her throat, feeling the place where her voice lived, buried but alive. She had survived 8 years by not trusting power. And now, power had chosen her. As she lay there, listening to the distant heartbeat of the pack, a single, terrifying thought surfaced and refused to leave. What if the Alpha King wasn't waiting for her to speak, but for her to be ready when she finally did? Morning settled softly over the Alpha King's domain, filtered through stone and shadow. It did not arrive with shouting or chaos, but with the steady rhythm of order. She learned that rhythm quickly. It soothed something in her she had not realized was constantly braced for impact. Her days began before the others woke. She moved through halls still cool with night, carrying water, arranging scrolls, setting tools where they would be needed later. No one rushed her. No one shouted. When footsteps approached, they slowed instead of closing in. Quiet met quiet. Sometimes, she felt him before she saw him. A shift in the air. A weight settling behind her eyes. She would straighten instinctively, heart quickening, and moments later he would appear at the edge of her awareness, standing still, watching, never intruding. At first, his attention terrified her. Now, it unsettled her in a different way. She learned his habits without meaning to. The way he paused before speaking to others, as if measuring words he did not waste. The way his gaze flicked to doorways, corners, exits, always aware, always guarding. Power lived in his restraint more than in any command he gave. One morning, she dropped a stack of polished blades. The sound rang too loud in the corridor. Her body reacted before thought. She froze, shoulders tensing, breath caught in her throat. Old fear surged, sharp and familiar. A shadow fell across the blades. She looked up. He was already kneeling, gathering the weapons with careful hands. Not hurried. Not irritated. When he handed them back, their fingers brushed. The contact was brief. Electric. She flinched back, heart racing, eyes wide. He did not pursue the reaction. He only watched her carefully, his expression unreadable. "You're safe," he said quietly. The word struck deeper than he could have known. Safe. She had not felt that word apply to her in years. After that, something shifted between them. He began to speak to her more often, not to demand, not to test, but to include. Simple statements. Observations about the weather, the state of the pack, the coming season. He never waited for replies. He spoke as though he understood she listened. And she did. She listened to his voice the way one listens to a river, steady, powerful, controlled. She learned the cadence of it, the pauses where thought lingered. Sometimes, she answered without meaning to, not with words, but with nods, with glances, with the smallest changes in posture. He noticed. Once, during a meeting, a council elder scoffed at her presence, his tone sharp with contempt. She lowered her head, ready to disappear. The Alpha King did not raise his voice. "Speak with respect," he said calmly. The room went silent. The elder stiffened, face flushing. "I meant no offense." "You did," the Alpha King replied. "And you will not repeat it." No one challenged him. She stood very still, chest tight, eyes stinging with something dangerously close to emotion. Protection, given without demand, without expectation, was unfamiliar enough to feel unreal. Later, when she passed him in the corridor, he paused. "You heard that," he said. She nodded. "Good," he replied. "You should." The words lingered with her long after he walked away. Days blended into one another, quiet moments threading together. She began to feel the safety in her bones. Her steps grew lighter, her hands steadier. She no longer startled at every raised voice. That frightened her more than fear ever had. Because safety invited trust. And trust invited risk. One evening, she stood at the open window of her chamber, watching torchlight flicker below. He approached without sound, stopping a respectful distance away. "You could leave," he said. "No one would stop you." Her heart skipped. Leave. Freedom. She turned slowly, meeting his gaze. He watched her closely now, waiting. Not commanding. Offering. Her throat tightened. She wanted to tell him she stayed because this was the first place she did not feel hunted. Because his restraint felt like kindness. Because his silence spoke to hers in a way words never had. Instead, she shook her head. Something unreadable crossed his face, relief, perhaps. Or something more dangerous. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, the steady strength he carried so effortlessly. "You don't owe me your voice," he said softly. "But if you ever choose to give it, I will listen." Her breath hitched. For one terrifying moment, the words surged up inside her, pressing, aching to be released. Her lips parted. Then fear closed around her throat like a fist. She looked away. Silence reclaimed her. He did not push. He only stepped back, giving her space, though something unspoken lingered between them, fragile and alive. As he turned to leave, her hand lifted slightly, without thought. He paused. Her fingers trembled. Her voice hovered on the edge of existence. But the cost was too great. She lowered her hand. He nodded once, as if understanding far more than she had given him. When she was alone again, she pressed a hand to her chest, heart aching with a feeling she did not have a name for. For the first time in 8 years, silence was no longer only a shield. It was a choice. And she was terrified of the day she might decide to lay it down. Silence became heavier once it was no longer required. She felt it in her chest each time she stood near him, the words pressing against her ribs as though they were alive, searching for a way out. Safety had softened her defenses, and that frightened her more than cruelty ever had. Pain sharpened survival. Kindness blurred it. She began to notice how often he watched her when he thought she wasn't aware. Not with suspicion. With concern. It showed in the way his jaw tightened when others spoke too harshly. In the way his attention tracked her through crowded spaces, not possessive but protective. As if her presence had woven itself into his sense of order. That kind of attention was dangerous. Because it made her want to trust him. And trust was the one thing silence could not protect. She reminded herself of the cost. If the truth emerged, if it was discovered that she had chosen muteness rather than suffered it, she would be judged not as a survivor, but as a deceiver. Pack law was unforgiving. Lies to authority were treason. Lies to an alpha king, unforgivable. Punishment would not stop with her. Anyone who had sheltered her, even unknowingly, would be questioned, blamed, possibly destroyed. And he would be shamed for protecting someone who had fooled him. The thought twisted painfully inside her chest. So she stayed silent. Even as his presence grew closer. One afternoon, the domain buzzed with tension. Messengers moved quickly through the halls, their voices hushed. She sensed unease before she understood it, an old instinct, honed by years of watching storms before they broke. She was sorting records when he entered without warning. The room stilled. He dismissed the others with a glance, leaving only the two of them amid shelves of parchment and stone. Her pulse quickened, though she kept her expression blank. He approached slowly, stopping just out of reach. "Look at me," he said. She did. His eyes searched hers, sharper than before. Not accusing. Questioning. "Tell me something," he said quietly. "When you're afraid, do you choose silence?" The question struck too close. Her breath stuttered. He waited. No demand. No threat. Just space. Terrible, tempting space. She could end it here. She could speak. She could explain. She could finally let someone know why she had buried her voice for so long. Her lips parted. Then the memory surged forward, hands closing around her wrist, breath hot at her ear, the certainty that screaming had not saved her then. Fear wrapped tight around her throat. She shook her head once, eyes lowering. The lie settled between them, heavy and bitter. Something flickered across his face. Disappointment. Not in her, but in the answer. "I don't believe that," he said after a moment. Her heart pounded. "You react too quickly," he continued. "You understand too deeply. Silence like yours is learned." She said nothing. He stepped closer, just close enough that she could feel the heat of him, the pull of something instinctive and dangerous. "If you are hiding," he said softly, "you don't have to do it here." Her fingers curled into her palms. If she spoke now, everything would change. Law would descend. Protection would shatter. His trust, if she had it, would turn to betrayal. She lifted her gaze and met his eyes. And lied with everything she had. Her face remained calm. Empty. Convincing. The room felt colder. He searched her a moment longer, then exhaled slowly, stepping back. Very well, he said. But understand this. His voice hardened, not cruel, but resolute. Secrets have a way of choosing their own time to be heard. He turned away. As he left, she felt the fragile thread between them strain, not broken, but pulled tight enough to ache. She sagged against the shelf, breath shaky, heart racing. She had protected him from the truth. Or perhaps, she had protected herself at his expense. Later that night, she sensed eyes on her as she crossed the courtyard. Not his. Sharper. Curious in a way that felt wrong. A woman lingered near the shadows, watching her with narrowed eyes. When their gazes met, the woman smiled faintly. Knowing. Fear crawled up her spine. Silence had kept her alive for 8 years. But now, someone else was listening. And not everyone who listened meant safety. It began with a missing seal. At first, the disturbance felt small, too small to warrant fear. A murmur in the halls. A tightening of order. Guards moving with purpose instead of routine. She sensed it before anyone spoke her name, the way she always did when something was about to turn. By midday, the whispers had sharpened. By evening, they were no longer whispers at all. She was carrying records across the inner corridor when a hand closed around her arm. Not rough, but firm enough to stop her. She looked up to find 2 guards flanking her, faces unreadable. Come with us. Her heart dropped. The room they brought her to was open, public, meant for judgment. Elders gathered along the stone benches. Warriors stood at the perimeter. And at the center, watching her with an expression she had never seen before, stood the Alpha King. Concern. And something like restraint pulled too tight. A parchment lay open on the stone table between them. An official seal was used without authorization, an elder announced. Orders were altered. Supplies redirected. The elder's gaze cut toward her. You were the last one assigned to those records. Her breath stuttered. She shook her head immediately, hands lifting instinctively. No. Never. She had touched nothing beyond her task. The elder frowned. Speak. Her lips pressed together. A murmur spread. She refuses to deny it. Convenient. Silence when accused is as good as confession. Her chest burned. She looked to the Alpha King then, not pleading, but desperate for him to see what words could not say. He did. His jaw tightened. His gaze flicked to the elders, then back to her. She cannot defend herself, he said carefully. That is known. And that, the elder replied, is not our fault. Anger stirred in the room, subtle but growing. Fear fed it. Someone had challenged order. Someone had dared to use authority they did not possess. And she was the easiest answer. Search her chambers, another voice said. If she is innocent, proof will surface. Her stomach twisted. They searched. They found nothing. But absence, it seemed, was not enough. She had access. She was protected. She was trusted. Each word cut deeper than the last. She stood there, surrounded, voiceless in a room that demanded explanation. Her silence, once armor, now turned against her. The Alpha King said nothing. That was worse than anger. Not because he doubted her, but because the law bound his hands. Because defending her too fiercely now would only confirm suspicion. Because kings, too, were watched. She felt it then. Her silence was no longer hurting only her. It was hurting him. Her gaze dropped to the stone floor as the decision formed around her like a tightening noose. She will be confined, the elder declared. Until the matter is resolved. Her heart clenched. Imprisonment meant isolation. Interrogation. Pressure. Pressure broke people. She could end this. One word would do it. Her voice burned at the back of her throat, desperate and ready. She could speak. She could tell them she hadn't done it. She could expose the truth and shatter the lie she had lived inside for 8 years. She looked up. The Alpha King met her eyes. In them, she saw warning, protection, and something that felt like trust, fragile, strained, but still there. If she spoke now, the truth would spill beyond this accusation. Questions would follow. Laws would descend. He would be forced to answer for why he had sheltered a deceiver. Her voice might save her, but it would destroy him. She lowered her gaze and chose silence. "Take her," the elder said. The guards moved in. As they led her away, chains cold against her wrists, the Alpha King stepped forward at last. "This is not over," he said, his voice low and deadly calm. She did not look back. The cell door closed behind her with a final, echoing thud. In the darkness, her breath shook. Silence had once protected her. Now, it had become her sentence. And somewhere beyond these walls, the truth was waiting. Patient, inevitable, and ready to be heard. The cell was colder than she expected. Shadows clung to every corner, pressing close, as though the darkness itself had been waiting for her arrival. She pressed her hands to the stone walls, feeling the chill seep into her bones, and tried to breathe through the panic that threatened to undo her. Every instinct told her to remain silent, to endure, to wait. But this time, the risk was far greater than mere punishment. The Alpha King's presence weighed heavy in her thoughts, his calm, measuring gaze now impossible to escape. He had sent no one to check on her, yet she could feel him watching, somehow, from the distance of his authority. Hours passed in tense quiet. Then, the stir of footsteps, slow, deliberate, echoed down the corridor. They stopped outside her cell. She felt it before the door moved, the shift in air, the brush of authority, the danger that had always followed him. The door opened. He stepped inside. Not an inch did he lower his eyes or falter in his control. He stood there, tall, steady, utterly composed, like a mountain untouched by storms. She sank to her knees instinctively, her gaze fixed to the floor. "You have hidden something from me," he said. His voice was calm, but beneath it thrummed a current that made her blood freeze. She could not lie. Not now. Not under the weight of his certainty. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. Her hands shook. The years of silence, the 8 long years she had fought so desperately to maintain, tangled with the terror that she could not escape. I am not mute," she whispered. The words were barely audible, yet in the silence of the cell, they seemed to echo louder than any shout. He froze. His dark eyes bore into hers, searching, measuring, assessing. Then something dangerous flickered across his face, not anger at her, but fury at the world that had made her this way. "You lied to survive," he said quietly. Not accusing. Not condemning. Simply stating a fact he already knew. She nodded, swallowing hard. Tears pricked her eyes. 8 years of fear. 8 years of hiding. 8 years of careful steps and silent endurance, all laid bare in a single confession. "I had no choice," she said, voice shaking but firm. "If I had spoken, if I had used my voice, I would have been claimed, taken, destroyed. You don't know what it's like to be nothing. To be ignored until you are the easiest prey. I could not survive if I had been seen." He knelt slowly, closing the distance between them, his presence overwhelming yet protective. His gaze softened in a way that made her heart ache. "I have seen you," he said. "Even in your silence. I have watched you. And I understand now, everything you have endured. Every choice you made to stay alive. Every secret you carried alone." She wanted to collapse against him, to pour out her fear and her relief and the grief of years without anyone truly seeing her, but she remained on her knees, trembling. "You don't need to hide from me anymore," he continued, his voice low, commanding yet gentle. "Your silence, it was never weakness. It was survival. And survival, in this world, is far more powerful than compliance." Her tears fell freely now, unrestrained. The fear that had been her constant companion, the one that had kept her mute all these years, began to dissolve under the weight of understanding, of recognition, of a protection she had never dared to hope for. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, his touch careful, deliberate. "No one has the right to force you into submission. No one. Not the pack. Not the laws. Not even fate itself." She met his gaze fully for the first time, letting her voice rise stronger, steadier. "I survived. I lived. I kept myself alive for 8 years. And now I do not want to hide from you." He allowed a rare, slow exhale. Then, the corner of his mouth lifted slightly. Not a smile, not satisfaction, but a quiet acknowledgement of something sacred between them. You have always been stronger than anyone knew. Even me. For the first time, she believed it. And he knew, in that moment, that nothing, not law, not envy, not danger, would stop him from keeping her safe. Outside, the world waited with its judgment. But inside that cell, nothing existed except the truth finally spoken and the fierce, unyielding promise of protection he offered her. And she understood, with trembling certainty, that everything was about to change. The corridors of the Alpha King's domain buzzed with tension the moment the truth was revealed. Word spread faster than wildfire, carried on whispers that carried fear and anger in equal measure. Elders and warriors alike gathered, their faces hard, eyes sharp. They had been deceived, and deception, in the eyes of pack law, was unforgivable. She sat in the council chamber, silent as always, yet every gaze in the room bore down on her like a blade. Some eyes burned with outrage. Others flickered with fear, uncertain how to respond when the king himself had already chosen her side. The laws are clear, one elder declared, voice loud and unwavering. To lie to an alpha is to commit treason. Punishment must follow. Murmurs rose through the chamber, confirming the weight of the accusation. Some demanded exile. Others whispered death. She kept her head lowered, heart hammering. Fear and guilt threatened to overwhelm her, though she had done nothing beyond survival. The Alpha King rose. His movements were deliberate, measured, and commanding enough that the room fell silent instantly. Even those who had been shouting felt the sudden stillness pressing upon them. She lied, the elder continued, pointing at her. She deceived you. She deceived the pack. Punishment is required. She survived, he said, his voice low but unyielding. And her deception protected her from forces none of you would dare confront. She did not act against the pack, nor against me. She acted to survive. That is the truth. The chamber erupted in murmurs again, but this time, no one dared speak over him. An elder's eyes narrowed. And you, Alpha King, would protect her. Against the law. Against us. Yes, he said simply. Against all of it. Shock rippled through the room. Some warriors exchanged incredulous glances. One elder's hand shook as he gripped the edge of the table. You cannot. You would bring shame upon yourself. You would bring chaos to the pack. He stepped forward, gaze sweeping the assembly. She is under my protection. Any who oppose this will face me first. The pack law does not grant you the right to destroy someone I have chosen to shield. Her chest tightened. She wanted to speak, to plead that he need not risk so much for her. But the words would have undone everything. His trust, the fragile hope she had only just begun to feel. She remained still, letting her silence stand for the respect and fear she could not voice. The room seethed, but no one challenged him further. They could not. His authority radiated so fully that even the most stubborn could sense the impossibility of defiance. When the council dispersed, murmurs followed her like shadows. Some cursed her luck. Others cursed him. But one truth lingered. No one would touch her again without reckoning. Later, alone in the courtyard, she approached the edge of the stone platform where the Alpha King often stood. He looked at her without words, his gaze calm, unwavering. She could feel the weight of unspoken questions between them. She swallowed hard. I would rather accept exile than see you endangered, she whispered, voice trembling but clear. He shook his head, almost imperceptibly. You will not make that choice. You are not to offer your life as protection for me. I am the one who chooses to shield you. Her pulse quickened. Relief and/or collided within her. This was a protection unlike any she had known, not given begrudgingly, not enforced by law, but freely, intentionally. And anyone who dares challenge it, he added, voice low and dangerous, will learn what it means to cross me. She felt the dangerous calm in his words, the absolute power restrained yet ready to strike. For the first time in her life, she realized that her silence had earned her not just survival, but a protector unlike any other, a force that would not be swayed, not by law, not by fear, not even by the whispers of the pack. Her heart ached with gratitude, fear, and something warmer, something unspoken but growing, trust. The world outside their shared space waited with judgment. But inside this fragile bubble of quiet, she understood a truth that made her chest soar and tremble at once. She was not alone. Not anymore. And for the first time in 8 years, she allowed herself to imagine the possibility of hope. The great hall was heavier than she had ever imagined. Stone walls loomed like silent judges, banners of the pack hung in shadowed silence, and torches flickered, casting uneven light over faces carved with expectation, fear, and fury. Every seat was filled, elders, warriors, and onlookers, all here to witness what some whispered would be the punishment of the girl who dared deceive an alpha. She stood at the center, hands folded in front of her, spine straight though her heart raced with every beat. Every eye in the hall seemed to pierce through her silence, weighing the worth of her life against laws she had long evaded simply by hiding. The whispers were sharp now, not curious but accusatory. A liar. A deceiver. Unworthy. And yet, in the midst of the scrutiny, he stood at the front, the Alpha King himself. His presence was absolute, unshakable, and fiercely protective. Every movement of his body radiated calm control, but she could feel the tension beneath it, a storm held in check by sheer will. An elder stepped forward, voice ringing. For lying to the Alpha, for deceiving the pack, for daring to hide the truth, she stands accused of treason. The laws are clear. Punishment is required. Murmurs erupted, the hall vibrating with the weight of centuries-old tradition. Some called for exile, others whispered death. The decision felt already made before she had the chance to breathe. The Alpha King raised a hand. Silence fell immediately. Every murmuring voice cut off, every shifting foot halted. His gaze found hers, steady, unwavering. "Let her speak," he said. A collective gasp rippled through the chamber. She froze, breath-catching. Speak. To these eyes, these faces that had stared at her for years as though she were nothing. Speak in a hall where every word might be twisted, used against her. But when she met his eyes, the trust he offered, fragile, fierce, absolute, shimmered in the depths of his gaze. She felt the truth of it sink into her chest. Protection. Not enforced. Not demanded. Chosen. Her lips parted, voice trembling like a small flame in the darkness. I am not mute, she said, the words carrying farther than she had imagined. The room fell utterly silent, hanging on every tremor of her voice. I have been silent for 8 years, but it was not because I could not speak. It was because speaking would have killed me. A whisper ran through the hall. Eyes widened. Faces shifted. Murmurs of disbelief and/or collided with the rules that had governed them for generations. She drew in a shaky breath and continued, each word stronger, clearer, carrying not just explanation but courage. I survived by hiding my voice. By keeping myself invisible. I was almost claimed by a cruel shifter when I was younger, and I learned that survival meant silence. I learned to endure, to listen, to observe. I lied to protect myself, to live. Her gaze swept across the chamber, and then settled on the Alpha King. His presence steadied her, his quiet strength giving her courage she had thought lost forever. This was not deception born of malice, she said, voice rising. It was survival. And if survival is a crime, then I am guilty. But if life itself is the measure of worth, then I have lived, and I have endured. The chamber hung on her words. Silence stretched long, pressing, and then murmurs returned, but now softer, hesitant, uncertain. Sympathy began to weave itself through the fear and anger. Some faces softened, realizing the truth of her suffering. Some hardened, clinging to law over understanding. The Alpha King's gaze swept the room, calm yet unyielding. She has spoken, he said, voice low and commanding. And in her words, she has revealed nothing but truth. Protection of life is not treason. Courage in silence is not crime. This girl has shown strength that none of you could have measured. The hall stilled once more. Every whisper died. Every judgment faltered. Tradition itself seemed to pause under the weight of his authority. An elder cleared his throat, but his words faltered as the Alpha King's presence cut through every attempt at argument. Her sentence, he said, voice ringing like steel tempered with fire, will not be dictated by fear, by law twisted, or by envy. Her fate is mine to decide. She swallowed hard, chest tight with fear and anticipation. For the first time, she realized that the outcome of her trial would not be dictated by the pack, but by him. The room held its collective breath. He stepped forward, slow, deliberate. His gaze fell on her, and a quiet command echoed without words, "You are safe." And in that moment, she understood. The judgment of the silent girl was no longer in the hands of those who had once mocked her, feared her, or ignored her. The fate of her voice, her life, her very existence rested in the choice of the Alpha King. And he would not fail her. The hall had fallen into a tense hush, every face fixed upon her and the Alpha King. The trial had stretched hours into a relentless storm of judgment and whispers. But now, at last, the moment of decision had come. She felt the weight of every gaze, every expectation, but she no longer trembled under it. Not entirely. He approached her slowly, deliberately, filling the space between them with a presence so commanding that even the walls seemed to bend toward him. She kept her gaze lowered, hands folded in front of her, yet her heart thundered with a force she could no longer deny. The Alpha King paused mere feet away. The room seemed to shrink, leaving only the two of them, silence stretching taut between words and glances. Every eye in the hall followed his next movement, knowing that the choice he was about to make would defy tradition and reshape the pack forever. He knelt, not in submission, but in an offering that demanded her attention. "You have endured," he said softly, his voice carrying over the stunned whispers. "You have survived what no one else could, hidden your voice when your life depended upon it, and borne your fear with courage that amazes me. For 8 years, you kept yourself safe through silence. Now, you may choose to speak, to act, to decide your fate." Her breath caught. Her throat felt tight with a mixture of fear and anticipation. To be chosen publicly, openly, it was more than any dream she had dared. To have agency, to give her consent, this was a gift she had never thought possible. He held her gaze, unwavering, waiting. His hand extended slightly, an unspoken invitation, a silent question. "Will you allow me to claim you, not as a conqueror, but as someone who has earned your trust and your choice?" The hall had gone still. Warriors and elders alike leaned forward, sensing the gravity of the moment. Her lips parted, voice trembling yet firm. I accept," she whispered, every syllable resonating like a bell in the quiet chamber. "I choose you." A collective gasp swept the room. Shock and disbelief clashed with awe, yet none dared challenge the Alpha King now. He rose, his eyes never leaving hers, and extended his hand fully. She stepped forward, hands meeting his, and for the first time, she felt the weight of being seen, not as a pawn, not as a mute, not as someone to be overlooked, but as someone powerful, chosen, and worthy. The bond formed then, strong and undeniable. It was more than protection. It was recognition, trust, and a promise. She felt it course through her, a heat and calmness entwined, an energy that belonged to them both, shared in a single, unspoken agreement. Whispers erupted again, but now they carried fear for what they had witnessed. The Alpha King's enemies, who had hoped to see her silenced or punished, faltered. Authority had shifted, power had been claimed, not through force, but through choice, trust, and courage. She felt the eyes that had mocked her, that had whispered cruel doubts, now turn uncertain, wary. They could see she was no longer invisible, no longer weak, no longer a secret. The Alpha King lowered his head slightly, brushing a strand of hair from her face, a gesture intimate yet deliberate, a public claim made without shame or coercion. "You are mine," he said quietly, the words both declaration and protection. "And I am yours." Her chest swelled, tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. For the first time, she felt safe and powerful at once. She had been chosen, not forced, not stolen, but willingly, deliberately, and with full respect for her voice and her will. The pack would remember this day. They would remember the courage it took to speak, the restraint it took to protect, and the bond that now existed between Alpha King and the girl who had once been silent. Her former abusers, her doubters, those who had dismissed her, now they were exposed, their whispers impotent against the truth of the claim. Justice had found its mark. She raised her head, voice strong and unwavering this time. "I am here. I have chosen. I have survived. I will no longer hide. The Alpha King's hand tightened around hers in silent approval, and in that moment, the world shifted. She was no longer the invisible girl who had hidden behind silence. She was chosen. She was claimed. She was alive, and her voice, though once buried, was now hers to wield freely. And the Alpha King, powerful and feared, had claimed her not by force, but by honor, respect, and the undeniable strength of their shared bond. The murmurs of the pack faded, replaced by a new reality. She belonged to him, and he to her. The trial was over. The claim was made. And for the first time in her life, she felt both safe and whole. The morning sun spilled over the pack lands, golden and unyielding, a new day declaring itself with the same certainty that coursed through her veins. She stood on the stone balcony of the Alpha King's hall, hands resting lightly on the railing, gaze sweeping over the territory she now helped protect. The wind caught her hair, lifting it gently, as though the world itself recognized the woman she had become. She was no longer the silent girl who had survived by hiding. She was the Luna, the queen beside her Alpha. She had found her voice, and with it, she carried not just her own story, but the promise of justice for all who had once been overlooked or dismissed. The Alpha King joined her quietly, falling into step at her side. He did not speak immediately. The silence between them was comfortable now, a shared understanding forged through years of hardship, fear, and trust. When he finally spoke, it was soft, resonant with the authority he had always carried. "You are not the girl who hid in fear anymore," he said. "You are stronger than you know. Stronger than I ever imagined." She turned her head slightly, meeting his gaze. Her eyes, once cautious and wary, now held a calm certainty. "I have survived," she said. Her voice, steady and melodic, carried across the balcony. "I have endured. I have chosen. And now, I speak, not for fear, not for survival, but because I can." He smiled faintly, a rare, gentle curl of his lips that made her chest ache in ways that had nothing to do with danger and everything to do with trust and connection. "And I hear you," he said. "Always." The courtyard below was already bustling with the pack's activity. Wolves moved with purpose, humans with determination, all under the shadow of his leadership, and now, hers. Those who had once doubted her, whispered against her, or sought to diminish her presence looked up and saw a different woman. Not a silent prey. Not a secret. But a queen who had earned her place beside the Alpha King through courage, wisdom, and the unwavering strength of her spirit. She raised her voice again, louder this time, addressing those who could hear. "No one who hides in fear is weak. No one who survives alone is unworthy. Let every voice, silent or spoken, be heard. Let justice be the measure, not envy. Let protection be earned, not stolen." The pack fell silent, listening. Her words carried not just authority, but the weight of lived experience. Every syllable was a declaration, every breath a claim to the life she had fought for. The Alpha King's hand found hers, squeezing lightly, a silent acknowledgement that this was their shared victory. Together, they had weathered deception, fear, and tradition. Together, they had defied expectation, reshaping the pack not through fear or coercion, but through trust, choice, and love. Later, in the quiet of the halls, she walked freely for the first time in years, her steps unhurried, her head held high. She no longer flinched at raised voices. She no longer shrank from attention. She had survived 8 years of hiding. She had faced accusation, judgment, and danger. And now she had a voice that could command respect, bring justice, and offer hope. The Alpha King walked beside her, silent but ever present, a steady force anchoring her newfound power. They moved through the halls together, not as protector and protected, but as partners, equals in strength and purpose. At night, she stood once more on the balcony, the stars above bright and infinite. She breathed deeply, letting the wind carry away the remnants of fear she had clutched for so long. She had chosen to speak. She had chosen to trust. She had chosen life. And in that choice, she had found herself. Her voice no longer hidden. Her spirit no longer broken. Her place beside the Alpha King no longer uncertain. She smiled softly, a quiet triumph. The pack below, the Alpha King beside her, the world stretching endlessly outward, They were all witnesses now to the woman she had become. She was no longer silent. She was heard. She was the queen who had found her voice. And the world, for all its danger and injustice, would never silence her again.